Have you ever thought about whether or not what you believe about good and bad, right and wrong, makes sense? What if the morals we are taught in school are not really the best way to live our lives? This is the challenge that the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche makes in his writings, which are against the basic rules of morals. With his strange personality and controversial ideas, Nietzsche not only called basic ideas like goodness and charity into question, but he also said that they might actually be bad for people's growth. A lot of people think that the morals we follow are what make life decent and fair. Nietzsche, on the other hand, says that the morals we receive was made to rule over, control, and limit us. He thought that traditional morals, especially Christian morality, kept people in a life of failure and didn't let them reach their full potential or succeed at great things. These criticisms weren't just against Christian ideals or a certain moral system. They were also against the framework that supports normal morality. Not following a set of rules for morals, Nietzsche says, but making our own ideals is what we should do. He doesn't just attack religious or political groups. He also doesn't like the idea of a morality that comes from outside of us and makes us less free to be ourselves and want power. He says this is the biggest thing standing in the way of real freedom and human growth. So, what would happen if we chose to give up on standard ideas of right and wrong and make our own rules? What does that mean for our everyday lives, our interactions, and how we see the world? If this thought about power and morals spoke to you, please subscribe to the channel and turn on alerts. Let's talk about how to change our beliefs and become the best versions of ourselves. There is more to Nietzsche's criticism of Christian morals than just a rejection of its ideals. Nietzsche said that morality as we know it came from a dark place. It was created by people who were angry and oppressed and couldn't show their strength or power, so they turned to morality to change the values of those who hurt them. The angry people's morals praised weakness, submission, and not being able to do things on your own instead of encouraging strength, self-sufficiency, and affirming who you are. According to Nietzsche, this anger was what led to the development of modern morals. He thought this process was a way to get back at them while pretending to be good. People who were weak, humiliated, or repressed and couldn't stand up to their master's power made a set of values that put down everything their abusers stood for, like strength, power, and leadership. This flipping of values led to slave morality, a way of thinking that turns bad things into good things and good things into bad things. Things like humility, patience, and forgiveness that were once seen as weak or submissive were praised as holy qualities. Nietzsche's ideas were a huge change from this moral view. Being good, he thought, shouldn't come from being weak, but from affirming power and life. He thought that the only purpose of angry people's morals was to keep people in a state of failure. Nietzsche thought that in the early societies of humans, the strongest people became leaders and decided what was good based on their own strength, skill, and ability to lead. If you ask him, he would call this morality great morality or master morality. From this point of view, being good meant being able to take care of yourself, protecting the group, and proving who you are through personal greatness. People who were noble had a positive ethic that praised life and the desire to be great. This moral vision didn't talk about kindness or modesty. Instead, it talked about power and being in charge of your own life and the lives of others. It was a system that pushed people to get better, learn new skills, and do things that made them stand out, leaving a record of greatness. Nietzsche thought that these values encouraged what he called human greatness, the power to get past problems and push the limits that society sets. Things changed, though, when social groups came into being. Because the downtrodden couldn't use their power, they started to turn these ideals around. Masters put a lot of value on being strong and in charge, but slaves started to value being weak, humble, and obedient. This movement wasn't just an inactive way to deal with oppression, it was a real change in morals. Nietzsche called this new set of ideals slave morality, and he thinks this is where many of the problems with modern morals come from. Nietzsche saw the slave morality as a reacting morality that tries to get rid of the good things about strong people. It's not just a morality of the weak. In the beginning, it starts to see everything that stood for power, strength, and fame as bad, and starts to praise traits like humility, forgiveness, and kindness that were once seen as weaknesses. In this situation, the slave's morals comes out as an attempt to make weakness acceptable and make sense of their place as slaves. That's why this moral movement makes a society that values mediocrity and limits people's potential, as if wanting power or greatness were bad or evil. Nietzsche doesn't want to go back to a morality based on the master's strength. Instead, he warns against the risks of a morality based on anger. He thinks that the slave morals not only stops people from trying to be great, but it also keeps up a society of mediocrity where people accept their flaws and fit in with them. Nietzsche thought that this flipping of values meant that mediocrity had won over greatness, and he thought that this would cause the human spirit to become stagnant. He thought that the real life, the one that doesn't follow the rules of morality, needed people who could go beyond traditional morality and find a new way of being, a creative and affirming morality that was based on personal growth and getting past oneself. One of the main ideas in Nietzsche's theory that keeps coming up is resentment, which he sees as a major force in modern morals. To see how deep this idea goes, we can look at Peter Schaffer's play Amadeus. In it, the character Salieri, a skilled but unhappy musician, is filled with jealousy and anger toward Mozart. Salieri thinks of himself as a good person who works hard. He sees Mozart's natural talent and feels like he can't reach that level of success. He comes up with a plan to kill Mozart because his envy turns into a deep hate. This story shows in a powerful way how damaging anger can be. At first, Salieri tries to hide how weak he feels by being nice and even friendly. But as his jealousy grows, he can't handle how much better Mozart is. His anger starts out slowly but grows into a damaging force that makes it impossible for him to think straight and changes his morals. Both Mozart and Salieri have sad endings. Mozart dies too soon, even though he doesn't know about the plot, and Salieri destroys himself in an attempt to get back at Mozart. Nietzsche thinks that this kind of anger is what makes modern morals possible. He says that over the course of history, people who were weaker and couldn't compete with the strong learned to value weakness, humility, and submission as a way to change the balance of power. This movement wasn't just a change, it was a real shift in morals that had an effect that lasted for hundreds of years and created a circle of mediocrity where weakness was praised and greatness, strength, power, and strength were criticized. In general, people who are angry see themselves as victims of a culture that values strength. Salieri is no different. He stands for the morals of the powerless, who try to explain their helplessness by turning accepted values on their heads. Nietzsche thought that traditional morals ran on anger, and he thought that this cycle of anger and payback was the reason why people don't always reach their full potential. Nietzsche didn't want people to return to the morality of the masters. Instead, he thought that people could go beyond to traditional morality and make new values that support life and the creative power of each person. He thought that in order to do this, people had to stop being angry and start welcoming the power of individual strength and self-affirmation. Nietzsche thought that Christianity was the highest form of this slave morality. People often talk about values like humility, forgiveness, patience, and love for one's friend as virtues, but for Nietzsche, these values are just signs of a morality that praises weakness. He thinks that Christianity is the best example of a religion that makes people suffer and be average while hiding this truth with promises of future benefits, like living forever in heaven. Nietzsche thought that Christianity, with its emphasis on suffering, poverty, and humility, was an ideology that encouraged people to be submissive and ignore their own important forces. He thought that religion was a way to control weak people by giving them comfort and help, but it kept them from becoming powerful and great if they broke free from its moral requirements. Nietzsche, for instance, sees the Christian message of forgiving one's enemies as a way to give up. Christianity tells us to accept others as they are, no matter what they do, instead of using force to control them. He thought that Christian morality was not a celebration of life, but a rejection of it, because it ignored the need for self-love and independence in favor of an ideal of submission. That Nietzsche had a negative view of Christianity is just one example of the morals of the angry. It does not mean that he was completely against religion. He thought that Christianity was a major example of slave morals that caught on with a lot of people over time. He only wanted people to get rid of these morals and come up with a new way to think about life and right and wrong. Nietzsche's theory is based on the idea of the will to power. He believed that every person has an inner force that makes them want to affirm themselves, control their surroundings and other people, and make their own future. This will isn't just a desire for power or control from the outside. It's also a drive to stand up for yourself, grow, and beat yourself every day. Nietzsche thought that people are truly great when they give up the rules of traditional morals, which they think came from anger and submission, and start living by their own values, which they make up. He was against the idea of a single moral code. Instead, he said that everyone should be able to make their own rules based on their own will to power and their desire to grow as a person. He thought that people like Napoleon Bonaparte showed this will to power. Nietzsche saw Napoleon as the perfect example of the Übermensch or overman, someone who doesn't follow outside rules of right and wrong and only wants to be the best. Napoleon, with all of his genius and cruelty, was the perfect example of how strong his will and personal power were. Nietzsche, on the other hand, didn't think it would be easy to get rid of traditional morals. He knew that the morals of the angry person was strongly ingrained in people and that it would take a lot of work to get past this way of thinking. He thought that over the years, society had built a culture that valued mediocrity and uniformity, which made it hard for people to break free from moral rules they had been taught. However, Nietzsche's Übermensch is not someone who turns away from pain or battle. Instead, they are someone who faces them head-on and uses them to get better. For Nietzsche, life is not about finding comfort or happiness. It is about power, growth, and getting through tough times. He thought that what made a person great was the ability to turn pain into something useful, to start over when things got hard, and to leave a legacy of excellence. Nietzsche makes us think about the values that guide our lives by calling standard morals into question. He wants us to think about religion and social norms and ask ourselves if we are living by our own values or just following values that we were taught. Religions that teach weak and angry morals, like Christianity, can't be the basis of a real and satisfying life. Instead, we should strive for greatness, no matter what society says is right or wrong. We can see that we can do a lot more than we think we can by doing this. Nietzsche taught that real freedom is being able to make up our own morals and live by them, without worrying about going against what we were taught. We can only get past the limits that others have put on us in this way. Only then can we reach the greatness that lies within each of us. What do you think? Are you ready to question the morals you were taught and follow your real will to power? Don't forget to like and share the movie if it made you think and made you want to learn more about these intellectual ideas. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the station for more movies that can help you reach your full potential and live a more honest life. Have a nice trip!